mute so we have not too much noise, and then we'll unmute for the presentation or for the question and answer session. Once we get to that point, you have kind of an orderly queue of questions. If people will raise their hand, and the way that you do that on Zoom is if you're on your computer, there's a button you can click. If you're on your phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. If you're having a hard time with the raise hand function, perfectly all right as well. Just find a lull and hop in there with your question or comment, and we'd be happy to hear from you still. Folks still rolling in until about. Reminder, can everybody mute? We're not talking. We'll give about 9 more minutes. We're going to wait till 10 minutes after the hour to start the presentation, so we have plenty of time for folks to join. We'll give a few more minutes here for everybody to join. For folks who have joined in the last couple minutes, the format here is we're going to do a presentation from Hecate and then a question and answer session. So during the presentation portion, the first portion, please make sure to stay on mute so we limit the noise in the room. And then afterwards, we'll open it up. And in order to ask a question, make a comment, I'd like you to raise your hand. And you can do that either by pressing *9 on your phone if you've joined by a phone, or clicking the raise hand button if you're on a computer. If you can't figure out the raise your hand function, that's okay. We still like to hear from you. Just find a lull in conversation and then jump on in there. We'll just wait a few more minutes, everyone. We'll start in just a couple. Okay, let's go ahead and get started, everyone. This meeting is our third informational open house about the Cider solar project in Oakfield and Elba, New York. We're hosting this meeting over Zoom rather than in person due to COVID restrictions. This won't be the last conversation we have. We start our conversations with the community very early intentionally. So as far as format goes, we'll have a short presentation here at first and then open it up for questions and comments, answers. That'll be sort of the meat of what we're doing here today. The idea is this is a forum for the community to interact with us and ask any questions that they have, tell us what they think about the project, those kinds of things, and for us to talk about the project a little bit with the community. So while we're going through the presentation portion, everybody please mute your phone or your computer microphone. If someone has a comment or a question after that portion, when we open the Q&A session up, please raise your hand by either pressing *9 on your phone or clicking the raise hand button on your computer. Otherwise, if you have a question and you can't raise your hand for some reason, that's okay. Just find a lull in the conversation and jump right in. We'll start by talking about the company. We're Hecate Energy. We're a developer of clean energy power plants in the United States. We were founded in 2012, and we focus on solar, wind, and battery storage projects. Our founding team is based on a team of energy industry veterans who've worked together for over 25 years. So they have deep experience in many different kinds of electrical technologies, not just solar, wind, and battery. But that's what we focus on now because that's what folks seem to want the most now. As Hecate Energy, we've entered into over 2.1 gigawatts, that's 2,100 megawatts of power purchase agreements across the United States. That's enough to power about 1.3 million homes in the United States. And our pipeline includes an additional 12 gigawatts of power plants that are under development right now. So our team, Hecate Energy team, is myself, Phil Mooney, who's on the line as well, Diane Sullivan, and we've got our Stantec group, which is our permitting and environmental experts, led by Jen Kelly, who's also with us today. We'll talk a little bit about the project at a high level. It's 500 megawatt photovoltaic solar facility located in Elba and Oakfield, New York, and Genesee County. We're anticipating about 2,800 acres at this point to be occupied by project components inside the fence. And for those who have joined prior meetings that we've had, the other two open houses, you'll notice that acreage has decreased over time as we continue to hone and do studies on which pieces of land are good to place panels on, best to place panels on, and where ought we avoid. So that acreage is reduced over time, and we're at a point now when we're able to show kind of where we think panels will actually go and fence will actually go. So that's the map on the right-hand side of this screen. and yellow is where we have planned panel locations. And this is the first time we've presented this map, so we're excited to show that. It represents some progress on our side and some clarity, I'm sure, on your side. So a power plant like this, a 500 megawatt one in this area, is capable of supplying 920,000 megawatt hours a year of renewable electricity. And that's enough to power about 125,000 average New York homes. So more than enough energy to power the entire county. Along with that, there's significant economic benefit to local government. Some of that's in the form of increased tax base, things that'll benefit the county and town governments. Some of that's in direct bill reductions for residential customers of electricity in the area. We'll talk a little bit more about those economic impacts and things that the project does for the community later. But the highlight is it's a $500 to $650 million privately funded infrastructure improvement in the area. We're excited about that. I'm gonna go ahead and look at the map that was on that right-hand side a little bit closer up. As I just said, we've refined the panel locations as we go along, and the things that inform where we decide to put these are studies, for example, your wetland studies, your cultural and species studies, wildlife studies, and engineering, public and agency input. We talked to many different groups and thinking through how we place and where we place these panels. And this is our best thought at this point in time to orient everybody. The village of Elba and the village of Oakfield are south of where these panels are located. You can see in this image, it says village of Elba kind of centrally. I can point it out with the laser pointer actually. The village of Elba is right here. And Lockport Road runs along right here. And this line is the power line, the large power line to which we would interconnect and which crosses east to west, so north of Lockport Road. So we're continuing the community dialogue on purpose so we can coordinate with everybody who might be affected by it, stakeholders, as we're putting together plans for the project. And the reason that we do this and start with that larger area and then hone to something smaller and something like this and continue to hone even after this is we want to be thoughtful and listen to the community's input on how we do this so that we can be the best possible neighbor in the area. We'll talk a little bit about the technology we're going to use. These are photovoltaic solar panels mounted on galvanized steel tracker structures. The panels themselves are the same ones placed on over 1 million homes across the United States. They're made of glass, aluminum, plastic, common materials mainly. And they hold a pretty low height profile, about 10 feet at their highest point. So they're mounted on these steel posts that are stuck into the ground. They don't have concrete footings, so just pounded piles that support a racking structure that rotates east to west each day following the sun. So when we say 10 feet at the highest point, we mean when the tracker is tilted such that the highest point is at the edge of one of these trackers, that's going to be about 10 feet off the ground. The technology uses no fuel. The only fuel would be direct sunlight, hitting the panels, direct and indirect sunlight, in fact. It emits no air emissions. It's very quiet. Has no water discharge, avoids wastewater discharge as well. So low impact technology overall. We'll talk about how that technology works for a moment. Sunlight coming from the sun. I'm sorry, can we make sure everybody's muted, please? So sunlight hits the solar panels and dislodges electrons in those panels that start a flow of direct current down the wires, which run to an inverter. And that direct current is inverted to alternating current, which is the electricity that goes along power lines is an alternating current. And then the arrays from the inverters collect power through a collection system at medium voltage and transform that voltage at a transformer or substation up to the high voltage that the wires at that 345 kV large wire sends power down the line at. From there, the power flows to the closest use, whether that's a household or business in the area, whatever it is. And talk for a second about why we would develop solar. Some of the advantages that we talk about around solar are air emissions. Most are aware that the state and governments around the world are focused on addressing climate change. So a solar project like this avoids about 400,000 tons of CO2 emissions, which is equivalent to taking about 89,000 average cars off the road every year. Projects like these protect and rejuvenate the soil because the land underneath the panels is going to be a grass meadow, as opposed to most of the land that we're covering here has historically been agricultural land that's tilled and used every year for agricultural purposes. It'll just sit in a meadow. As far as water resources go, solar plants protect and improve the water resources, again, because you're not tilling the soil every year, which means you'll have less runoff from sediment, and they don't use fertilizers and herbicides like a agricultural operation might in regular rotation. That being said, I'll turn it over to my team and talk a little bit about the permit process that we go through when we do one of these projects. Jen at Stantec, Jen Kelly, will walk us through that process.
Yeah, thanks, Harrison. As Harrison mentioned, we'll be going through the Section 94C permitting. And Section 94C is like a nonstop shop for New York. The Section 94C regs were just finalized earlier this month. The law provides for review of new or modified major electric generating facilities by the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, which is known as ORES. It is a compressive process that requires local and community involvement, and also includes involvement of other agencies, such as the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Agriculture and Markets, the State Historic Preservation Office, and to name a few. The law provides for all renewable energy projects that are larger than 25 megawatts, like Cider Solar is. They will need to obtain a permit approved through ORES prior to construction. And it provides a review and approval process through ORES. The regulations will address any environmental impacts, and it'll also identify any potential mitigation measures if needed. The Section 94C provides a requirement to hold hearings for any significant issues. And as far as intervenor funding, Section 94C allows for the municipalities and community members to have access to funds to help review the project and assist with advising ORES to the project's compliance with local laws in regards to the environment, public health, and safety. The eligible municipality parties include any city, town, village, or county in New York State that may be affected by the project. And Section 94C establishes that the municipalities have a right to funds in an account to ensure that they can participate. At least 75% of the funds are reserved for municipalities, and local agencies or community intervenor will need to submit a request for initial funding within 30 days of the date of the project's application to ORES. We can go to the next slide. I can talk about the schedule a little. Okay. For the project schedule, to date, Hecate has been developing various pre-application studies, including impact analysis for visual, glint and glare, wetlands, noise, and wildlife studies. That just names a few that have been done and are in the process of being done. This is Hecate's third public open house, and prior to today, we had an open house in October and December. And as shown on the schedule, Hecate plans to submit the full application for the project to ORES at the end of April this year. Hecate expects the full application to be determined compliant by ORES during the third quarter of 2021. And during the second quarter of 2022, Hecate would expect a decision on the application from ORES. And once Hecate receives a decision, we anticipate to begin construction during the third quarter of 2022 and expect construction to take approximately 1.5 to 2 years. And then facility operation will be expected to commence in 2023. And as part of this 94C overall process, Hecate is required to involve the public throughout the entire process and has prepared a public improvement plan that will be used throughout the project and has been established to help establish relationship with the local community. And Harrison will discuss a little bit more about that on the community outreach slide.
Yep, I appreciate that, Jen. Thanks. As we start talking about how we interact with the community, let me start with our philosophy there. And what that is we want to start the conversation with stakeholders, with the community as early as possible so that we make sure we listen to the community and if it's needed, provide information that helps put what we're doing in context, tell you what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we think through it. And we try to collaborate all the way through the process to make sure this project benefits the community as much as possible, because there is serious benefit that comes along with projects like these. Again, this is our third open house on the project, so we've been working a long time to get input from the community and understand the priorities here. And we continue to provide these occasions for the community to learn more about the project and provide feedback. In terms of ways to provide that feedback and ways to interact with the project, this slide is going to be useful not just now, but as a point of reference. If you go to cidersolarfarm.com at any point in time, there's ways to get in touch with us on that website, but we cover a few of them here. My email account is shown right here to anybody who wants to reach out for your group or organization to get a briefing on the project. Feel free to send me an email and we can work that out. In addition, every week at 1 o'clock on Wednesdays, I do a public Zoom call. It's sort of a more informal open house type meeting for people if they have a question or if they're thinking about the project and just want to talk to me. I'm available to absolutely anyone. All you have to do is, again, on the website, there's a Zoom meeting page, and you'll find a similar meeting invite to the way that you got into this meeting to come in and can talk to me on Wednesdays in a more informal manner. We've also listed a toll-free number that you can call and drop in voicemail. If you call that number, I'll call you back and we can have a conversation. We coordinate closely with local government and first responders for projects like this. We train the fire department for not just utility scale solar, but how to deal with solar on residential structures and commercial structures as well. It's just something that we provide to the community, sort of as a thank you. We also enter into revenue agreements that bring significant new funds to the community. And then to talk about what happens after we are done generating energy as a project, when we're done functioning and want to shut down the solar facility, all the components that we put there get cleared and properly recycled or disposed of without any impact whatsoever to local taxpayers. And that land gets returned to an agrable condition at the end of the project too. So it goes back to farmland if it was farmland, or a similar condition to where it was or where it is right now. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more detail about the benefits that projects like these bring. One of the main ones is a significant contribution to local tax base. So we'll create tens of millions of dollars in additional payments and contributions over the life of the project in terms of tax revenue, which provide budget certainty for the tax jurisdictions, your town, county, school, with which to kind of serve the needs of the community. On top of that, there's significant economic impact during construction and during the operations of the project, specifically during construction. And between construction and operation, Hecate Energy's investment will result in $75 million in positive economic stimulus, including jobs created during construction operations. And that'll result in economic benefit to the area as well. Another item I'd like to bring up is in the recently finalized 94C regulations, there's a mechanism for utility bill reduction for residential customers in Elba and Oakfield. and in any community where a solar project is built, meaning a project that goes through the 94C process has to make available money to directly reduce the electric bills that folks who live in these areas would pay. Now, we're still developing more refined estimates, but our early estimates of how much the bills would go down as a result of that utility bill reduction program are about $150 a year per household. We'll keep moving. Talk a little bit about what happens when the project is operating. The project is responsible for maintaining the land underneath the panels, as well as the vegetative maintenance around the fence line. So any landscaping that we do for a visual buffer or landscaping that we're doing within buffer zone outside the fence line, we're responsible for keeping up, and we do it at our cost. Any solar panels that are broken or damaged through acts of nature or otherwise, no materials leak out of those panels, pollute the air or ground, and we're, as the project, responsible for any repairs or maintenance to make sure that the project keeps operating in a safe manner. Now, panels don't require chemical washing. To the extent that we do wash the panels, which we expect to be infrequent because this area has significant rainfall across the year, but to the extent that they do require washing, just plain old water is what we'll use. And then when we get done producing power at the project, the site gets cleared of all components and the panels are properly disposed of, as are the other components associated with the project. Most of the materials that go into a solar project are steel and glass and aluminum and recyclable components. So we'll recycle everything we can from the components that we take in the decommissioning process, or resell. If the panels still have value, they might find the market to be resold. The land itself will be restored to its pre-existing condition, back to an arable state. In the case of most of the land here is currently active agricultural land. My colleague Diane is going to talk a little bit about the studies that we've been doing to think through how we do our project.
Yeah, thanks, Harrison. You know, just a bit ago, Jen talked a little bit about the 94C permitting process, and we've had to conduct a number of studies to prepare for that permitting process. We've been doing that over the last year in consultation with many of the state agencies and with the local towns. We've conducted a number of significant studies on the project site, and we'll just focus on a few of them here. Obviously, the visibility of the project is of concern locally, and we'll conduct two studies that address the visibility or the visual impact of the project. One is a visual impact analysis that we conduct that is comprised of viewshed analysis and preparing visual simulations of what the facility will look like. And we've done that from various vantage points around the project area. We'll take a local photography, and just in a little bit, we'll show you some of the results of the simulations that we've prepared, what the facility will look like once it's constructed. And then also we've conducted a glare analysis because the project is in proximity to some regional airports. We've done an analysis of the potential for glare impacts, both on the airports, but also to local houses. So the results of those studies will be contained within the application and made publicly available for review. Additionally, we've done a number of studies to evaluate the composition of wildlife habitat in the project area, both for common wildlife species, but also for threatened and endangered species. We've done that in consultation with DEC and with Fish and Wildlife Service. And some of the studies that we've conducted, we started last spring with a breeding bird survey. And over this past winter, we've been doing some analysis of winter raptor surveys. And then also there are other land use related studies and other localized studies that we conduct as a part of the application that's required for 94C. Those are largely around land use. We'll do an assessment of the amount of vegetative communities in the project area. That includes terrestrial communities as well as wetlands and streams. We've conducted those surveys, were completed with those, but also cultural resources, impacts or noise from any noise generating components of the project, which are very small, then effects on transportation, and then an evaluation of socioeconomic benefits to the project. So all of those will be appended to the 94C application, and as I said, will be available for public review. So, we've touched on this subject just a little bit, but, during both construction and operation of the project, we'll be implementing best management practices to minimize impacts to water and soil, which are, two of the most abundant resources in this particular part of Western New York. And we'll do that through implementation of a erosion and sediment control plan. And then during construction of the project through the maintenance of the project site. So once the project is constructed, will be all the areas that have been previously disturbed, including areas under the panels, will be seeded. So we'll be using a native seed mix, both where the solar panels are located, but also in any areas where we disturb the project site. So let's say we impacted a wetland with a buried electrical collection lines, we'll restore that area with native seed mix. And so all of the area, and Harrison mentioned this earlier, under the panel areas will be in a meadow-like condition for the life of the project. And subsequent to that, after the project is decommissioned, it can be returned to farming practices.
Thanks, Diane. I'll talk for a second about climate change and New York State's priorities, which, put it quickly, are ambitious. New York State's got goals of 40% emissions reduction by 2030 and 85% reduction by 2050. In order to hit those goals, projects like these will need to happen. This project helps contribute to those goals. And again, will help avoid CO2 emissions equivalent to removing about 89,000 cars on the road or off the road. Again, this is a priority for state government and something that we fall right in line with what we're doing here. Jen's going to talk for a second about the kind of visual buffers and screening that we do and why we decide to do one thing versus another and how we think about it.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Harrison. So as Harrison mentioned, the project will use vegetation to provide screening and buffers. And the vegetation was selected based upon using native, naturalized, and non-invasive species that are similar to the character of the surrounding landscape. The vegetation would use deciduous trees, which they lose their leaves in the fall. So with the deciduous trees, shrubs will lose leaves, but would have full branching, and some will retain fruit to provide wildlife value. And also use would be evergreens, and those are the trees that keep their needles. So with the deciduous and the evergreen materials, they'll be sited in a way to provide a layer and a natural look that will blend in with the surrounding existing landscape. Evergreen trees are used to provide screening, and native shrub species were selected for wildlife value and visual interest. When selecting the vegetation, the characteristics considered were the native locale, hardiness zone, seasonal interest, and wildlife value. So those selected species would provide things like butterfly and bird habitat, forage plant for deer, nesting habitat for food, and also they would provide cover plant for birds and mammals. And besides the picture shown here, some additional vegetation that we would use would be gray dogwood, common 9-bark, eastern red cedar, and eastern white pine. Those would be a few additional ones. As far as maintenance, the plant material will be maintained by the contractor until accepted by the owner, and at that time, the owner would take over the maintenance duties. And there is also a warranty on all plant material that are based on established metrics. So I'm going to pass this off to Diane next to talk about how the vegetation gets incorporated into the visual sense.
Yeah, thanks. We talked a little bit earlier that this is our third meeting, and some of the previous meetings we haven't been able to yet show what the facility will look like here. right in our project area. So in addition to kind of showing the layout for the first time, we're happy that we're progressed far enough along that we can also show simulations from key viewpoints in the project area. And as Jen mentioned, including some of the planting materials that she just talked about. So for the visual impact analysis that will be included in the application, we've prepared many photo simulations for folks to take a look at, but we thought we'd pick two views here just to demonstrate or illustrate what the effects of screening planting will be. So this is key observation point 1. It's located on the western side of the project area along Lockport Road, just east of Albion Road. And so here you can see some of the notes in the lower right-hand corner of the photo location. It was taken from the road shoulder, and the viewer is about 170 feet from the nearest solar array. So you can see the existing condition. That means, you know, the way that it looks today, or at least it looked last fall, the existing condition from this viewpoint location. The second portion of the image is taking a look at the installation of the panels and the fencing to scale, but with no landscaping yet incorporated into the view. The third slide shows what that landscaping will look like after it's installed for 5 years. And then the fourth one is the landscaping at maturity, which we would expect to happen at 15 years of growth. So this is one of the examples. And then if we flip to the next one, here's another location that's on the east end of the project area from a slightly different viewpoint. Now we're looking kind of down the panel arrays in this view. Again, it's a similar distance from the panel. So a foreground view, it's very close by, right from the road. This one is located just west of Oak Orchard Road. This one was selected because it shows a view from one of the snowmobile trails that intersects the project. So here again, you can see the existing condition in the first frame, the simulated conditions, but without the benefit of the planting installed. The third one would be about 5 years of growth. And then the final image is the mature growth of the planting plan.
All right, appreciate that. That's the end of our regularly scheduled presentation area. So at this point in time, we'll open it up for a question and answer session. Just to remind everybody, or if anybody joined while we were presenting, the way that we're gonna do this is, if you can, raise your hand by phone or computer. If you're on your phone, that's pressing *9. If you're on your computer, there's a button that says raise hand that you can click on. If you can't figure out the raise hand thing, that's fine. Just find a lull and jump on in there with your question. So with that being said, yeah, oh, it looks like we've got a hand raised.
Yeah, hi, I have lots of questions, but my first question is about communication. You keep saying this is the third meeting. I got a postcard in the mail. This is the first I've ever heard of this. I didn't know anything about the October or the December or January meetings that you mentioned. So how had you informed the public? How do you plan to inform the public moving forward? And also, what if we're unavailable on Wednesdays at 1 o'clock for Zoom meetings?
So let me take those in turn. So the first one is sort of how we inform people in the past about these meetings that we do. We've done a number of different things. One of them is sending mailers around to people within a certain proximity of the project. The other is posting, you know, at gas stations and Chaps Diner and places like that around town, billboards, or not billboards, posters that say, here's when we're meeting and how you can join. Those are just a couple of the ways that we've reached out to folks. Yeah, we've done those for each of the open houses that we've done, the October one, December, and this one. I'm sorry you haven't joined us yet, I suppose. Can you, before I get on to the next one, can you do me a favor and tell me your name and what town you live in, just so we can keep track of questions? And
Sure, my name's Terry Shamblin, and I live in Oakfield. And
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then let's see, the next part of your question was, what happens if I'm not available at 1 o'clock on Wednesdays? It's totally fine. I'm happy to talk to you anytime. One thing that you can do, I'm actually gonna go back in the presentation a little bit to that slide, community outreach. So on this slide right here, that's my personal email address. And you can email me there and just say, can we talk on the phone? And if you give me your phone number and when is convenient, I can try to work out a time to call you. Here's another one, calling that phone number and leaving a voicemail, giving information on how to reach you. We can reach out and have a conversation. Those are probably the two easiest ways to get in touch in a sort of impromptu manner that's not, maybe works better for your schedule. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure if I caught everything. Were there any other questions as part of that one?
Harrison, it might be worth letting Terry know that I think, do the past presentations that we did in October and November, are they still on our website so she can?
Yes, they are available on the website.
Okay, so Terry, if you want to go and look on the oh, I'm getting a lot of feedback. If you want to go on the website and look for that information, if you find it, that's wonderful. If for any reason you run into a problem finding it, let me know and I can get it to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Really, nobody else has questions? Okay, we'll let Nancy go. Sorry.
Oh, we've got a couple. Let's see. We can do, Terry got in there first, so go ahead there. Oh, well, how about Nancy?
Hi, I have a lot of questions, but I would rather maybe do a couple at a time so that other people could talk. I was just waiting because I thought Terry might have a bunch of questions, but my name is Nancy Brock and I'm from Batavia. And I have a bunch, as I said, of questions. Some of them you're going to be educating me about solar farms. So would any of this be viable without subsidies?
Yeah, actually, it is in most of the country. So actually, real quick, somebody's got their volume on in a way that it's echoing me pretty badly. It's not a big deal, but can you try to mute? So yeah, across the country, solar panels have gotten cheaper and cheaper over time. And so projects are getting more affordable as we go, and solar is one of the cheapest resources that are out there right now.
Okay, so you don't rely on subsidies, or you use them in a small percentage, or how does that work for you?
I don't know. If they're presented to us, I imagine we would take advantage of them, I think. Bill, what do you think?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, hi, this is Phil Mooney. Yeah, many parts of the country, there are no subsidies, but it really depends on the market. The energy market, the New York State energy market is trying to encourage renewable energy. So the state does have a program to buy renewable energy credits, which is one method that renewable energy is offering. In many cases, off-takers such as an Amazon or a Google that wants to buy energy, they may want the energy credits as well. So there really is a market for energy as well as energy credits, depending on which part of the country and what kind of market, what kind of energy market there is. There's different mechanisms.
So for your project, you are or you're not getting any subsidies?
Yeah, this project will have a renewable energy credit contract that will buy the credits, the emission credits, and then and then it'll also sell energy on the market. But there's no subsidies provided for these projects.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah,
Are you?
Harrison, was
Are
I
you guys-
mute, Harrison? I did say something. I might have been mute, Harrison.
I think you are okay, Phil. If the last thing you said was this project sells under a REC contract and then sells energy separately, that's the last thing I heard from you.
That's right. Yeah, and I think the point I was trying to make is that renewable projects provide both renewable energy or emission credits to off-takers as well as energy and capacity. So there's no subsidy for this project, although we do hope to have a renewable energy credit contract or energy emissions or energy sales contract as well.
Does that make sense, the idea of a renewable energy credits contract? You there, Nancy?
It keeps knocking me off. I'm not sure exactly why. So I guess I really don't understand that. And I mean, as you say, I've got contact information. I can always give you guys a call. Now, is this, are these pieces, parcels adjacent to any residential areas?
Yeah, there are going to be some residential areas adjacent. Let me go back to the map.
Harrison, one quick second. Nancy, if you could mute yourself on your end, we're getting a little feedback.
Yeah, I'm sure. I just can't get the screen to come up. I'm sorry about that. Let me see what I can do.
Yeah, so when you're done with your question, just mute it, and then I won't have to unmute you and mute you so that we don't get the echo.
Okay. So Nancy, if you're looking at the screen here in this map, are you familiar with this area? I know you're from Batavia, but it's north of Batavia about 5 miles.
Huh?
Okay. So there are some houses around here. The village of Elba is right here. There are some houses around.
And how do those people feel about it?
It's not a, well, probably have to ask them to some degree, but I haven't talked to every resident in the area. To the extent that I have had conversations with neighbors who are residential, it's been wonderfully positive. It's been quite good. And some of the residents that are right here are participant landowners, right? So they may have land that they've wanted to contribute. And some people have said, the land next to me is going into the project, so, you know, I wonder if I can add land to the project, and sometimes that works too.
Well, I'm a homeowner in that area, and then you see that little box with the line off of Lockport Road that is completely surrounded by yellow, and that little box with right there. Oh, keep going right there.
Yep.
That's
that
me.
one.
That's me. So my front yard, my backyard, my side yard, all the way up my driveway. I don't see how I could possibly even live there because I live there because of the view sheds, because of the wildlife, because of the rural scene. And I don't see how we could plow our driveway. I don't know how far off the driveway the fences go, how far off the property lines the fences go. But in the winter, we get substantial snowfall and we have to push it off into the field to make a snow fence. And it would be impassable for us to get up there in the winter. So as one homeowner who just heard about this, I find it very disturbing that I will have to look at those all the way down my road, all the way up my driveway, out every single window of my home.
Hey Terry, let's find something for you there, because I respect that you're going to be surrounded by panels, and we want to be a good neighbor. Maybe we can do something with trees or shrubs around there to make sure that you've got visual screen if you need it. As far as buffers go, there are setbacks that we have to be from property lines that are a certain distance. Jen, do you have those available? And let's find out, I don't know, maybe now or sometime later, let's find out how the moving snow is going to work, but we can work with you on that.
I don't want to live here surrounded by that. I'll just be honest. Good neighbors or not, this is not why I live here. I live in a rural area, and I checked out the Alabama Oakfield Comprehensive Plan, the most recent one that I could find. And it talked all about view sheds and agriculture and maintaining the unique environment of the area. And this seems to go against all of that.
Yeah, Terry, we can, to the extent that we can work with our engineers to do more detailed design and layout, considering your situation, because it is a unique one and one worth thinking about. I want to help. At the end of the day, I want to make my solar project too, but within those bounds, I'm going to do everything to make it as smooth as possible,
Okay, Harrison, I think we have another question with G. Boyce.
Okay.
Unmute.
Just wondering where she was just on there, Harrison, and you put the little star on where her property is. Do you know the address of that? We'd like to see where we are on Lockport Road, and then in accordance to where the yellow is. We're at
Sure.
30.
Sorry, go ahead. 30.
That was
38.
3684 where I just was.
Okay.
Terry, we feel
What
your
was your
pain.
address?
We're at 3853.
3853.
We will also
Okay.
be surrounded on 3 sides.
2 sides.
Let me find.
Well, we can't put them in between our houses.
Trying to orient myself to that location. Give me just a moment, please.
We would be, I think, on the other side of the road, just east of Terry.
Oh, I think I see. Okay. Okay. So directly across from you, there's some wetland, is that right?
Yes,
Probably.
there is.
Okay. So yeah, when you look out your front window, you probably won't be able to see any panels because all of that, none of those trees are going anywhere. And then to
But
the
on this-
north.
What
Yeah,
about the north?
The north, east, and west.
Let me take a look on the northeast and west. Give me just a moment. Sorry.
After you look that up, Harrison, it might be worth talking about setbacks from lot lines and setbacks from houses.
Okay.
Because it's
Yep, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah,
That was another question, was how far do you have to be set back from a residential property line?
Harrison,
Yeah.
I have that information for you.
Okay, thanks. And real quick, Ms. Boyce, on your west side, there aren't any panels until past the agricultural buildings that are, I don't know, a good ways down your next neighbor on the west side is going to be some agriculture. No, your second neighbor on the west side is going to be some agricultural buildings. there aren't any panels going west until you pass that. The panels do kind of go up over the hill. You know, there's that little hill there.
Yes.
And on the back side of that hill, there would be panels.
But not on the front of it?
Not that I'm seeing. And I'm sorry, the way that I'm looking at it right now is on my phone because I'm on my computer right now. But also, if you want to email me and send me your phone number, I can call you back for a much more detailed discussion of what exactly is going on yours. We can generally do the setbacks right now. That's probably helpful for a lot of people.
So what was the setback information?
You muted.
Harrison is 250 feet from the residence, 100 feet from the property line, whichever is greater.
Yeah.
Thank you, Harrison.
You're welcome. And again, feel free to reach out in particular about your house, because I'll give you a call and we can look at it on a map and that kind of thing. A much smaller map than, or a bigger map for a smaller area than what's on the screen right now.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey,
sure.
Hey, just to be on the funny side, can you slow down the cars going on Lockport Road?
We can try, I suppose. I don't know how.
Thank you.
Certainly. Ms. Brock, it looks like maybe has her hand up.
Oh. Terry, can you unmute?
I can. I have lots of questions. I don't want to hog the forum here, but you said in slide 3 that it has significant revenues to the local government, fire department, ambulance, and library. Do you have evidence of that in other communities, testimonials from other communities, how they have benefited or not benefited from these projects? Do you have what kind
and I can talk
significant revenue?
Yeah. Sure, I can talk through it. It's mainly through increases to the local tax base, because we get property taxed, you know, like a farm would, but farms pay, you know, we would pay multiples of what farms pay for the property tax on this particular land. Does that make sense? We pay a lot more in property tax.
Yeah, that does make sense. Well, as long as I still got you on the, how do the panels follow the sun's daily path? Are they motorized? Do they have oil? Do they make noise? Like, how does that work?
Sure. Let me pull up a picture. I don't know, Phil, do you want to walk through the exact mechanism? I can do it generally too if you want.
Oh, sure. Yeah. This is Phil. They're mounted on steel trackers. They call it trackers, and they track the sun from the east to the west. And they rotate very, very slowly, like maybe once every couple minutes. It might just notch over just maybe a half a degree. And if you were standing right next to one, there's a motor, electric motor, that's driven off of a solar panel. If you were standing right next to it, if it was very quiet, no wind, you might just hear the little click, maybe. Yeah, that's if you're standing a couple feet away. And they go very, very slowly. There's no hydraulics or anything like that. It's all driven electrically off of a small motor that controls one motor would control a long table of maybe 90 to 120 panels, all mounted on one table. The whole table would notch over about half a degree every few minutes. I don't have the exact numbers, and maybe it's a tenth of a degree, but it's every few minutes you might, if you look closely, you could see them just move a little tiny bit.
Thank you. Do they have oil though? I mean, like, do the parts
No,
need to be lubricated in
that's a
some
great
way?
question. That's a great question. No, they don't. The tubes are they're mounted in plastic sleeves. Sometimes they're steel sleeves too. So on each post, every 20 feet or so, there's a sleeve where the steel tube is mounted through it, and that sleeve it slides because it only moves a tiny bit, and it's designed to be no need for lubrication or grease or anything like that you might see in a high speed gear shaft. These are very they move very slowly and relatively infrequently. There's no hydraulic oil. There's really the whole solar plant is really made up of these solar panels, which is glass and silica and aluminum, and then the steel structures are all galvanized steel, and then there's cables that connect everything together, and then you'll see these small little motors with a communication card, kind of a little tiny box size of a lunch pail, and that will be able to communicate to all the different motors, so that a master server will send a signal out wirelessly to make sure that all the trackers are aligned properly with the sun, and it's all pre-programmed with the location on the altitude, longitude, and the season that dictate when these panels shift to optimize the sun exposure.
Thank you. Can I circle back to my last question about the tax base? So are there other towns who have benefited from this? Could you give us the names of those towns? Do you have testimonials from places where you have done this project before and they have seen the benefits for it to their community?
Yeah, so in the state of New York, there have been a lot of solar projects have been built recently and had their tax bases increase. We've also done projects across the country that tax bases increase. I'm sure we can come up with some, information.
Harrison, the one that comes to mind is Queemans. There's one that's pretty advanced and could speak to the relationship as far as that's concerned.
That's true.
Could you, Queemans, you said?
Yeah, it's the name of a town. We can go grab that, and actually, if you can email either me or the Cider Solar email just your contact information, I can get you some information.
Thank you.
Okay.
Nancy, do you have any more questions? Or Ms. Boyce, do you have any more questions? I know you have your hand still up.
I do. I do have a lot of questions. But, yeah, let me just hit a few of them. The life of the project.
I'm sorry, the audio was pretty hard to understand there. Can you repeat yourself, or you can put it in the chat, I suppose, if not, either way.
The life of the project.
Oh, lifetime of the project? Yeah, we estimate about 35 or 40 years lifetime of the project.
And that's a long one compared to the ones I'm hearing about. Tell me how we know the decommissioning amount will cover the costs that far into the future. Isn't it kind of hard to guess?
I'm sorry, Nancy. It's really hard to understand your audio. What can you?
Let me
repeat
say better.
that or something?
It sounds like maybe there's
No.
a bandwidth issue with your Wi-Fi or something.
What's the matter? Okay, so let me try again. You've got 35 to 40 years. How do we know the decommissioning amount will cover the cost that far in the future? I mean, we don't really know what things will cost that far in the future.
Did anybody else catch it?
Right?
I think what Nancy is trying to ask Harrison is, how do we know what the decommissioning? How do we know what the decommissioning? Gosh, Nancy, there's so much feedback in your line. There's something. Nancy, there's so much feedback in your line. There's something.
I sure wish there wasn't. I don't know how to fix it.
You know, one of the recommendations I could make is you could try to call the dial-in number as opposed to using the Zoom, because I think it's a computer-related issue.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Because we'd really like to hear from you. But Harrison, I think what Nancy's question was, is how do we know what the decommissioning costs are going to be this far into the future?
Oh, that's a good question. And to some degree, we don't, which is why the requirement is to include more than you think it could be and to use some conservatism around estimating it. So we'll put up a bond at time zero. And per ELBA local law, it's going to be 125% of the estimated decommissioning cost. And so that extra buffer is meant to protect for that. And as well as that, over time, we reevaluate the reasonableness of that number. And we say 5 years out, is that still what we think it is? Did it go up? Did it go down? 5 more years, you do the same question over again. So we keep checking in on it and adjusting.
You pay that in advance, right? So then you would.
Correct. Yeah, we post that bond in advance.
Okay, and I've heard panels. Is it called? How would you do that?
I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
I've heard recycling panels is difficult. How will you do that? What is the method that you use for that many panels? And that was one of my questions. How many panels is that?
So I think the question was about recycling panels, and there's 2 ways to think about it. And sorry, can we get on mute just while I'm responding? So one way of thinking about it is panels have a normal amount of degradation over time. You know, each year, the amount of electricity that a given panel can generate goes down a little bit over time, such that, you know, at the end of the useful life of the project, perhaps it's 40 years out or so, you're somewhere between 80 and 90% of the generating ability that panel had at the beginning. And you could sell those panels, you know, take them off the project, maybe wash them off and sell them to somebody who wants to use them at a discount. So that's one option. Beyond that, if there's no market for the panels themselves, you could take the components that go into those panels, mainly glass and aluminum, and recycle those subcomponents and sell them for scrap value.
Okay, and issues. What issues that people encounter with this type of a project?
What's the what encounter?
Health issues. What kind of health issues? I mean, there's all sorts of different concerns that people have about the health ramifications of a solar farm of this size.
Yeah, I know of no health ramifications, negative health ramifications associated with a solar plant like this. These are a really safe technology. It's very benign. You're taking the sun's energy and converting it directly into electrical energy, you know, right at the panel's face. You're not burning a fuel. You're not, you know, really having any impact beyond the land where you're sitting or right on top of it.
All right. What about US made components? Are these components all made in the United States?
We haven't selected our components yet anyways. You know, they get made all over the world, different components of these projects, but we haven't selected, you know, our final design components yet. So the short answer is I don't know where the final selected components are going to come from, because we're not going to buy our panels, for example, for another year. I'll go back.
Sure.
Let me go back to the.
Oh, sir.
Just to show the schedule again. We have about a year in between, a little bit over a year really, between now and when we would have a permit complete. And it's right around then that we would be buying equipment. Does that make sense?
And then
Does that make sense? Hello? Hello?
Oh, yeah, sorry, it looks like it muted me again. What percentage of past projects have you used of states versus those from out of the country?
I didn't really catch any of that. Can you try again? Sorry.
I sure can. What percentage in the past projects have you used of the United States components versus those purchased outside of?
You know, off the top of my head, I'm not quite sure. Phil, do you have ballpark numbers or anything? I don't honestly know.
No, but I think we typically require our contractors to prefer local content, but obviously they don't make the PV panels in New York State, much less even in the U.S. Even the U.S., I'm not even aware that they make some panels. There may be there's very few suppliers of even the panels. So let's face it, you know, the panels at this point are really from overseas, but like the tracker components are done in the States. There's one tracker supplier that's based in New York, and they have a facility in Buffalo that we're going to try to consider them. But obviously they don't make much cable anymore in New York State, but they do in the United States. So you know, if you want to follow up, we can try to come up with a number for you. But obviously it's going to change based on market conditions.
Yeah, that's true. And just on the same line of thinking, there is a material, you know, spending that's local resulting from these projects. And think about the jobs, you know, construction jobs in the area, you're going to want to have people as close as possible to the site. So naturally, the closer somebody is to the location, the easier it is for them to take that job there. So a lot of the construction labor is going to be very local in nature. Then, you know, you'll have those folks spending at the gas station or the diner, or maybe some lodging, that kind of thing. So the economic benefits related to the county and even Western New York are also going to be material, especially from a project this big. So
that time frame would be about 6 months, and then the 35 to 40 years wouldn't really have a lot of labor associated with it, right?
The word I heard was time frame. So
I can call in if it would be easier. I can do that.
I think it would be easier. Let's do that, and then in the meantime, it looks like Terry still has her hand up, so maybe we can go over there and come back to Nancy once we dial in.
If you can give me that number, that'd be great.
Okay. Let me.
What's the number?
Let's see.
Nancy,
Will, can you get her the number?
I chatted it to you. I sent it to you.
Okay, I think I can see where you're talking. Okay, thanks. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead there, Terry.
All right, I do have a few more questions. So
Sure.
in response to section 94C, it says, I'm asking what would constitute, quote, substantive and significant issues that would require an adjudicatory hearing? Like it says that, you know, what issues would those be that would require a hearing?
Diane, how about that?
I mean, we hope there are none. right? We hope that we submit a complete application and that any issues that are raised during pre-application, either with ORES or with any state agencies or with local community members, are completely resolved in a complete application. That's our desire. If we were to submit an application and ORES were to find that they wanted us to mitigate for an impact, let's say it was, we can just pick something. Let's say it was impacts to grassland birds. And we and another state agency disagreed in some way with what that mitigation would be. We could request that that issue be substantively vetted through an adjudicatory proceeding. So we would bring our scientists from Stantec, they would bring their scientists from DEC presumably, and we would basically discuss the topic until we came to a satisfactory conclusion. So that's an example of how that, what that might entail.
Okay.
But it's obviously our hope that any issues are resolved, early as we've been doing all this pre-application planning process. We'd like to have all things resolved at the time of application, and we would hope not to go to any adjudicated proceedings.
Right. So this is related to my next question. Then how have you minimized the impacts to wildlife and or mitigated any adverse impacts to them?
Yeah, I think I know that you didn't join any previous open houses, but I think Harrison started out talking about how we had looked at a much larger study area in the past. I think it's more than 7,000 acres. And we started doing some studies and refined our layout until we got to the locations that Harrison is showing on a screen now. And so this layout respects all sorts of habitats. For example, we delineated all the wetlands within a really large study area. Jen, it must have been 4,500 acres. And once we understood where all the streams and wetlands were, we got all the panels outside of them. So we're not citing any panels in wetland areas, for example. We will have to have some crossings with buried electrical collection lines, but those are temporary impacts to the wetlands. And, we won't even know where those are a year after construction. So that's one example of avoidance measures. The other is, we're very cognizant of the fact that we have some special habitat in the northwest area of the project, outside of the project site with Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge. And there's a number of species that have special habitats up there, such as bald eagles. So we worked with DEC last year to identify the locations of special habitats for species like bald eagle and any known nests, for example. And we made sure to set back any panel locations or any infrastructure of the project a distance that DEC asked us to. So those are just a couple of the examples that, resulted in the layout that you see here now.
Okay.
And Terry, just so, because I didn't know what it was when I first heard it, but DEC is the Department of Environmental stuff at New York State.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Okay.
And then in the backfield, for example, it's wet for part of the year, and birds and geese do land there, but it's not a standard wetland. It would not be qualified as a wetland, but it certainly does have habitat that looks to be like it's going to be affected negatively.
Yeah, I would say, it's a fair statement to say that development projects of all kinds displace wildlife. And what we've been careful to do is to site the panels and other infrastructure and locations that are outside of any critical habitat or specialized habitat. Obviously we know, I live east of you in New York State. I'm closer to the Syracuse area, and I look across my road and there's agricultural fields there. I live in a very similar community to this location. And certainly I know there's deer and coyote and geese and all sorts of common species that are located over there. And, those sorts of habitats are very common in New York State. So we will displace habitat here, displace wildlife habitat availability, but there's an abundance of that habitat type right in the project vicinity. And we've taken careful steps to avoid any impacts to habitat that's not common.
Thank you. Appreciate your honesty.
Thank you, Terry. Got a new hand up, so maybe let's jump over to Larry for a
Absolutely,
moment
that'd
and
be great.
keep bouncing around.
Terry, we can come back to you when you're after Larry. Thanks.
Yeah, my question is, do you plan on selling this project? I was reading that the big project you had in Texas was sold to a company in Japan. Is there a possibility that this is going to be sold before it's even built or finished?
There's a possibility that a project would get sold. The important thing to think about there is when we build a project, when we develop a project, we start entering contracts, you know, with landowners, with permitting agencies. A permit, I guess I would consider a type of contract with the folks that we would sell power to. And all of those contracted terms, all of the promises that we make are set in stone, and whoever would buy these would have to follow our word, our lead on making sure they comply with those things. Does that make sense? So it's not that, you know, a new person buys it and everything goes out the window. No, it carries with it all the obligations that we're here working through right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just we're giving up our way of country life here for so a foreign country can make money off it. Just doesn't sit well with me. But I understand it's a business, and you know you got to do what's best for the business. But you know, I've lived here for 32 years and looked at 800 acres of fields around me, and now I'm going to be looking out at solar panels, and just the thought of the reason I'm doing it is to make money for a foreign country is just doesn't set well with me. But I understand that what you're saying about the contracts, but just doesn't seem right.
So yeah, it's not necessarily any one country or a foreign country at all that would be buying a project. And in fact, Hecate Energy also owns some of the projects through affiliates that we've developed. So, you know, an eventual buyer isn't necessarily some foreign entity. But I understand the comment about changing way of life. Change, yeah, not always comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, you don't move to the country to, I mean, I realize that we have no choice in this matter. The state's going to push it through to meet their goals. But I mean, if a big factory wanted to build behind me, then, you know, it wouldn't be allowed to. But this is just going to get pushed through without really us having a whole lot to say about it. And it's not that I'm against green energy. We're, you know, it's the way of the future, but it's going to change our lives, and it's not going to be the same. And your project, what I think some of these project designers don't understand is it's not just your project. 5 miles from me, there's another huge project going in Byron. We're talking, you know, 6,000-7,000 acres of farmland is going to be turned into glass panels, and there's really nothing we can do about it. So I guess that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Terry has another question, Harrison.
Yeah, I appreciate Larry's comment, and I'm sure those companies aren't going to come in and say, I want to be a good neighbor to you, as you're saying. But who are the project stakeholders that get regular briefings and updates? The slide 10 said, you know, the project stakeholders get regular briefings. I'm just curious who they are.
Yeah, Will, you want to talk about the different groups that fall into that? Or Diane or Jen? It'll be,
yeah,
I'll give it
Harrison, are you talking, Harrison, is the question about the regular briefings, the weekly briefings, those
Well,
the public stakeholders?
Let's find
Good
out,
question.
because when we talk about stakeholders, I'm thinking that's the group of people who we consider stakeholders and notify that we're having open houses and so forth. The weekly meetings, they're not required meetings, or they're not even formal meetings. They're just there in case anybody wants to show up. So, but as far as stakeholders go, that'd be local governments, local agencies, that kind of folks, as well as neighbors. And I don't know, Jen, can you remind me the radius that we go to with neighbors?
I think Will has the details too, Harrison.
Or Will, yeah.
Well, I think in particular, Harrison, if you could just talk about your contact with the local officials, and the elected officials, and your constant communication with Chuck and others.
Yeah, it's true. So we've been working with the local officials, mainly the town of Oakfield and the town of Elba, and county representatives and the county EDC. We've had detailed discussions and introductory discussions starting over a year ago at this point, but pretty detailed discussions going on for about a year now. And in advance of when we had our first open house meeting, we were in contact with those local officials and talking to them about how this all works and those kinds of things. But yeah, it's a really important step in what we do to make sure that the people in the community know what's going on, and that we talk to the people who need to know as well. So I suppose, not sure what else to say about it. It would be probably helpful to see the radius of who we call neighbors. I can't remember if it's a mile or more than a mile, but it's at least a mile.
Well, to circle back to Larry's point, we really don't have any say in this. The state is, it is what it is. Is that accurate? And there's no recourse. I was shocked. I contacted our town supervisor. There's no town meetings. There's no town halls. There's nothing.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't agree that you have no voice in it. Even, beyond whatever legal framework there is in the 94C process, it really is my intention to do what's right by, my neighbors, as I consider y'all my potential neighbors. That's really important to me. And I really do hope that, after this call, for example, we can talk and understand your particular concerns. And again, I'd like to come back to, for a moment, we have not put in an application to the state yet. This is all pre-application kind of conversations that we have with y'all to make sure what we're doing works. And so it's a live process. Things are not set in stone at this point. Like, let's talk and figure out a way that we can do things together, because really that is the spirit in which I want to do things. And if we get to something that makes sense for us, and then have a permit based on that, or have a contract based on that, that is a contracted, permitted requirement, and nobody down the road can walk away from that commitment.
Yeah, Harrison, I'd go further as well, is that it is a strict requirement that we engage with a public involvement plan. Like we are required by the regulations to have a robust communication and public engagement plan. And not only does it help people understand and hopefully put them at ease that it's maybe not as bad as people might initially think, but it gives us feedback so we can design the project to make it the best we can. And it is not a foregone conclusion that these things are approved. This is a very robust process we have to go through. And we believe that very active engagement with people is sometimes harder at first, but it usually turns out to make the project better. And I think it's understandable. People are skeptical when this, for unknowns. Like if there's something that's not clear or unknown, it's very understandable that someone would have some skepticism. And our job, and Havoc Harrison's doing a very good job at it, is to engage people, to try to understand, and then look at the unique situations. Some of the homes that are very near the project site, there's a lot of options that can be looked at in the design and how things are set up. With solar projects, it's very low profile, and that's why That's why generally they're integrated fairly well into communities. Contrary to what you might see on a map, it's a big area, but when you're driving around, or even if you're at a home nearby the site, there are a lot of ways to screen it. But we understand, people have concerns, and we're going to take it very seriously.
And just to add to that, Terry, the requirements are 1 informational open house. This is our 3rd, so we're very proud of the communications we've had there. And we also have added that, I'll call them office hours once a week, which again aren't required by the regulations and most developers don't do. So we're trying to go above and beyond and just be available to the public whenever possible.
Thank you.
True. Sure, Terry. Now we've got another hand raised, so it doesn't have a name, but you're on video, so hello to you.
Hi, Harrison. Hi, can you hear me, Harrison? This is Charles Malone.
I can. How are you?
Great. I'm doing well. I'm glad to catch this. I'm on the road, but I had a question. By the way, I have information that I've been looking up for you regarding livestock underneath. I haven't even looked at it myself, but that's a whole other story. I can get that to you. I had a question regarding the impact of economics on the community. Maybe it's there. I'm wondering if there's something that we can actually get a hold of to understand better the economic impact from a tax-based standpoint. How will the community benefit from a tax income standpoint? Will school taxes go down? Will town taxes go down? How will the energy generated be taxed?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So locally, the taxes that are collected by the local jurisdictions, your town, your county, your schools, the folks who collect those get to decide what's done with them. So they may do, for example, if it's your school, they may do an improvement project, or they may reduce taxes in another way. But it's, we can't determine for towns what they do with that money, but we do make it available. And among the things that they could do are reduce taxes, improvement projects, whatever other priorities the community has. In terms of what those look like, we need to work through our process. Just in terms of scale, we work through our process and discuss with the town and with the county and with the schools how much those are going to be. And once we work through those conversations, it's going to be a number that is predictable and gives taxing jurisdictions kind of budget predictability too. So again, what they
if the assessment is equitable, is the assessment like, for instance, in relation to farmland taxes, is it similar to that? Because the income on energy is going to be much greater. So I'm wondering how that works. I know, and I don't know specifics, so I have to be careful in even asking the question or relating to it. But a lot of the aversion to wind energy was more related to that than the environmental aspects.
Interesting. So, I mean, I think the short answer is, compared to what these pieces of land are getting taxed now, the tax contribution is multiples of that. It's much, much higher.
Good.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
So Harrison, I believe Nancy is on the phone and would like to ask another question. Nancy,
okay, let's see how it works. Nancy, you there?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Ooh.
Nancy, do you still have your computer on? Your sound on your computer?
I disconnected that again.
Try muting the computer, turning off the microphone on the computer. Funny enough, I think this is worse. It might even be worse.
Can you try and type your questions into the chat function?
Okay, guys.
Let's try, yeah, Nancy, if you were using the chat function, if you want to put questions on the chat function, that might be the best way to do it, it sounds like. In the meantime, let's see, are there any other folks with questions? I don't see any right now.
Larry S. has got his hand up. So Larry, if you
Okay. Oh, and Larry, I forgot this the first time, but just so we can keep track of stuff, can you say your full name and what town you're in?
Yes, it's Larry Stratton, and I'm in Elba.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any thought in the neighboring, in the big project in Byron, they're setting part of the solar farm, they're making it like a community solar farm so that power stays right in the town. Is there any thought of doing that in this project?
There's a similar effect that's been thought out. We haven't thought through, I guess, something as detailed as here is a solar farm that's hooked up to, town hall or something like that. We haven't really been looking at that, but we will have a program associated with the project by which residential utility bills in Elba and Oakfield will go down. It's a relatively recent concept, and we're still working out the details on exactly how much they'll go down, but the early estimates that we've come up with show about $150 per household per year. And again, it's residential customers in Elba and Oakfield who would receive that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I just want to add to that. My earlier comment wasn't directed personally at any one of you in the company. I had an offline conversation with you around Christmas time about my autistic son, and you were very understanding, Harrison. So.
Oh, hey, yeah.
I just want to say that, my negativity was not directed at you personally. It's just,
it's okay.
You've been good, and I think you honestly want to be a good neighbor. So I hope it works out that way.
Yeah. And yeah, good to hear from you again. Sorry I didn't catch who you were right when you told me your name. Yeah, I don't take anything personally in this context. It's okay.
I have one more question too, if I could.
Yeah, sure.
With the setback, it's going to be, I think you said 100 feet from the property line. That would be the fence, right? So the landscaping, or if you do anything like that, would you maintain between my property line and the fence?
Yeah, we'd be responsible for maintaining any landscaping that's in between you and the fence. And so the setbacks also are, it's 100 foot from the property line or 250 foot from a residence, whichever is greater. So it depends on how far your house is from the edge of the property line as well.
Okay.
It could be larger. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think Nancy's going to disconnect her tablet and try again. Nancy, you want to try and unmute yourself?
Hello?
I feel badly for Nancy's audio problems, so we can't hear her questions.
Yeah, we'll have to, definitely, if Nancy doesn't get heard clearly. We need to set something up to talk to her.
Mhm.
Can you hear me or no?
Oh, there you are, bright and clear. Wonderful.
Okay, great. Okay, so just a couple more questions, and they are, let me see. I think a lot of the concern you're dealing with there is that people now are in a home and they're being told that in 2 years their home will change totally, and they can't leave because everyone knows this project is going to take place, so they can't sell their home. How do they deal with that horrifying experience in their life?
Well, there are a couple bits of that I don't think are set in stone in the way that you were suggesting. You know.
Okay, fair enough. I'm willing to listen. It's just we're facing the same thing where we live here, and it's a scary thing. And I'm just saying I understand how they feel, but what do you recommend that they do, because they don't really have any recourse?
So it's a really good question, and a hard question to answer for a lot of reasons. One is, you know, I don't live there and don't know what it's like quite like you do, but there were a couple aspects there. And maybe if we break it into smaller pieces, we can think about it like little acorns. But, you know, as far as the change to living in one particular house, we have some levers that we can and would like to use to make that as good as it can be. And some of those are visual buffer and adding some trees and bushes. And actually, Elba's been, you know, good about including in their local law that they want this kind of thing to happen, to bring some visual intrigue, make it a little bit more, I guess, sightly, the area where the fence would be. And that can be a good improvement to the way that it looks. And so that's one positive thing. We'll look again at the visualizations for just a second. You know, definitely the character of the view changes, but it kind of is in the eye of the beholder whether the quality of the view changes. You know, some people may prefer the latter view to the former. It's up to whoever to find that out for themselves. Now, it sounds like you may be one of those people who would not prefer it, which is okay, but there may be people out there who would. And, you know, so the notion that no one would ever, that you can't, are you saying you can't move because no one would ever buy that house? Because I'm not sure I agree with that.
Right. I could give a little insight. The solar in communities, rural and even residential areas, it's a relatively new thing over the past several years, right? And so, like, it's very understandable, the skepticism. However, what we found, and what a lot of communities have found, is that it's definitely not the big negative that people initially think. And really, some of it is in the eye of the beholder, but you know, there's loads of studies about even just property values where they do not go down, even though people speculate that they will. They don't. Like North Carolina has lots of solar that's been developed over the past several years, and it has not had the negative impact. As a matter of fact, it's slightly positive, and there's some theories about why. You know, so some think that perhaps it's better to know what's going to be there rather than something that in the future could be something they may not like. Now, that may not be the case in Genesee County, but maybe in Eastern New York that might be more of an issue. But like, there's definitely different views. There's definitely a difference between what people think and before the solar is built versus after. It's not as bad as people speculate originally. Now, all that being said, everyone's got, it's definitely has their own view, and it's very understandable to be concerned. I think there's, with the low profile of solar, there's a lot of opportunity to screen it. These panels are only 8 foot high, and there's lots of effective ways of screening it. Now, you know, it depending on the specific situation of the area, but so really, we do not believe that it is a negative or people are trapped. We think that there's a lot of opportunity people will buy homes near solar for a lot of different reasons. It's quiet and it can be screened, and it's a known issue. You know what the neighbor's going to be, but that being said, we know it's a lot to digest when people see it, and we want to try to work through it with people.
It is a lot to digest. And another question I had is, with the simulations that you showed for the plantings, there were still like large gaps. I mean, it was like 75-25. And is there a reason that you wouldn't totally cover the panels, or, you know what I'm saying? If you look at those pictures, there's big gaps, and that's after 15 years.
Yeah, so we've done a few different conditions in which we'll do a variety of things. One of the things we don't want to try to do is just have this wall of homogeneity across all viewing locations. So both of the view simulations that we're showing you here are along the roadway, right? So they're along Lockport Road. And when you're driving down the road, this intermittent screening, this intermittent sort of arrangement of plantings is going to be suitable for drivers, right? And it's going to really, the visibility of the facility is going to really be diminished because of this intermittent planting, especially when it's, reaching its maturity. But for your backyard, or say like Terry's surroundings, that unique condition where you have a view, that one's a little different because there's already forested vegetation around the house. But let's say you had open, unobstructed views, say from your backyard. Those instances in the planting plan, we really put dense planting, so that when the trees reach 5, 10, and 15 years, they really are screening the visibility of the facility. So
okay, so you're saying it varies. Okay.
Yeah, it varies. So this is representative of along roadways, but there's a different condition when we're talking about screening, say, your backyard from the panels.
Right. Now, how do you keep the vegetation from growing over the panels? You don't have to use any chemicals for that, do you?
No.
When you strategically pick, do you mean inside the fence or the landscape?
I mean, underneath the panels, how do you keep the weeds from growing up without using any type of chemical?
That'll be either or some combination of the following: regular mowing, a mowing regimen that's just cutting the grass at regular intervals, or, and we're looking into this, but we have not settled or promised or gotten anywhere definitive on this, but there's some opportunity, especially in New York State. Places like Cornell have done research on whether this works, with some positive indication that you might be able to, for example, put sheep out to pasture in those meadows, that meadow-like land that's under the arrays, and they can mow, they can eat their fill of grass underneath there, and then you would save yourself maybe a little bit on mowing, but in addition, you'd have a co-productive agricultural use of that land. That could be positive in and of itself. So
kind of interesting,
yeah. Again, we're looking into that, and we're taking it very seriously. We haven't committed to anything on that, and we don't quite yet know whether it's going to pan out. But it's something that we're kind of excited about.
Right. Why did you choose? Go ahead.
To answer the herbicide question, I want to make sure you clearly understood that. We would not anticipate broad herbicide use. First of all, it's very expensive, and then it's not. The DEC frowns upon it. Although there may be herbicide like targeted use around maybe certain fence or entrance ways or substation, for example, but not broadly across the field. It's not practical.
Okay, great. Do you anticipate this going more than 35 to 40? I mean, would there be a renewal possibility, or?
That'd be a possibility. It would have some momentum as a solar facility with it, and you would already, for example, have steel posts in the ground. It's not necessarily the way that it would go. We don't, at this point, plan that far in advance, and the leases don't run past that. But it could happen, sure.
Just curious. And why did you choose that location?
Well, let me flip back to another slide and tell you what very first attracted me here. And it's, where are we there yet? Not quite. Okay, you see that big purple line?
Well, I had to log off, so no.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. So
It's okay.
there's a big power line, and it's
Okay.
a really big power line that runs east-west.
Oh, I remember that from the picture, sure.
Yeah, that's what initially attracted us to this area. That's a great place if you're trying to sell power from which to sell power, because it's sort of an artery. It's a very important line to how power flows in the western part of the state, and a very good place to interconnect. And where where a project would interconnect is one of the more important considerations you make, along with, whether there are folks who are interested in being a part of the project. And it just so happened that in this area, over 24 folks are interested in being a part of the project. And we have a bunch of people who have signed up and been excited about it. So that's good too.
I gotcha. Now tell me, will the power poles be above the ground or underneath? Whatever it is that's taking power. Yeah.
Yeah. So the collector systems, you'll have wiring behind the panels on the backside of the panel bases that connect the panels, and then it'll run. And Phil, correct me if I've got any of this backwards. It'll run underground for a period up to inverters, come back above ground for just the distance from the ground to the inverter, and then run back underground over to collector stations or substations, but mainly almost entirely underground.
Mostly underground. Okay, great. That's great. Okay, and I've really taken up enough of you guys' time, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
That's okay. Speaking about time, there's about 5 minutes left in our scheduled time here. So if there are any questions from people who haven't spoken up yet and would like to, maybe we should give some priority to those folks. And then if there's time to come back around to the folks who we've been talking to a lot, let's do that. Well, sounds like maybe there's...
I have another question, Harrison, if nobody else is speaking up.
Go ahead, Chip.
I got confused. Actually, I got questions left in my mind after someone spoke about the physical setup of the visual barrier and the 100-foot or the 250-foot regulations. The visual, any plants or anything that's installed in the visual will be, it'll be within that 100 feet, won't it? It will be on the property, the renter's property. It will not be on, like, for instance, I'm a neighbor. It's not going to be on my property. It's going to be, will it be in that 100-foot buffer zone? Or will it begin after the 100-foot buffer zone?
The standard procedure is to have it in the buffer zone on leased land that the project is leasing.
Right, okay.
Your case is a little different because you took some trees out that you didn't know this was coming, and you took some trees out. So, I mean, if you want some trees on your land instead of in the buffer zone,
No, I don't want to have to utilize my land as a buffer zone. And
I see. Yeah, no, you won't. I
basically understood it to be that way based on one of the previous questions. So, no.
No. Yep. All the buffer screening occurs in land that is project controlled.
Okay. And what does that mean?
Meaning it's leased land where all the trees that we plant outside the fence goes. It's not neighbor's land. It's project leased land.
Yeah. I also had another question. The map that's there isn't very high resolution.
Yeah.
And if I look at this map here, my house is totally covered by solar panels. Is there a way? Is there a way that we can get a higher resolution imagery?
Let's think through that. I know in the meantime, you can call me or email me and we can get on the phone and I can show you, and we can just, you and I look at it together. And that offer goes for any neighbor. You can email me and we'll find a time to just one-on-one take a look at your piece of property. And we can do that at much higher resolution. Let's explore maybe, I don't know, but let's explore maybe making a higher resolution version of this to go on the website. I'm not sure if there's something stopping that, but maybe there won't be.
Okay. I have your contact information.
Yep.
You're all set, Charles. We're going to go to Terry for another question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you are planning to build substations or use what's existing?
Yeah, there will be a new substation associated with the project, and it's going to be on the north side of that purple line is where we have it planned for right now. It's approximately, and Diane or Phil, correct me if I'm wrong on this, approximately 5 acres. And it'll have gravel and the normal substation components associated with it. But it'll be part of it is the project substation right next to the utility substation that's owned by NIPA.
Yeah, it'd be located directly adjacent to the existing transmission lines.
Mhm.
Correct.
Maybe you want to put your cursor over again, right where it's located.
Oh, sure, absolutely. If you're looking at the screen, I've got the laser pointer on the planned substation location right now. Terry, can you see that?
I can, yep,
Oh, good.
right there. Yeah.
All right, we have 1 more minute, folks. So if you've got a last minute burning question, now's your time. Okay.
Hello?
Oh,
Hello? Nancy, it's Nancy. I'm sorry. I can't raise my hand anymore. But I have one question. In terms of a 1 to 100%, how much of a done deal is this?
That's going to be hard to estimate at any point in time, but I would say probably over 50% right now, hopefully for me.
Yeah, well, I'd be careful, Harrison, because nothing is a done deal until the permits are issued. So,
that's true.
So that's the answer. But we shouldn't presume anything. Nobody should feel like this is being rammed through. These projects have to go through a robust review process, and they have to be good for the community. So, and the state.
Right.
There's a long way to go. There's a very long way to go.
Okay. I got you. And you would encourage these neighbors to share with their neighbors what they're finding out tonight so that they can discuss it as well, right?
Oh, certainly. And to reach out to me. In fact, I've got the community outreach page pulled up again. I really do want to hear from folks. And I've got my direct email, like that's my personal, well, it's my work email, but I use it for everything. So feel free to send me a message on there. You know, call that phone number. I will respond. I promise. I really do want to talk to folks about this and work with folks on it, just like we've been doing in the past. But you know, it's important for us to have this communication line open in order to work with people. Until we hear what's going on, we can't really do anything because we don't know. So hopefully it's the start of good communication just between us.
And I'm sure everyone appreciates the fact that they can communicate with you. I know I do.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we're a minute over right now. So the resources that we brought up here are going to be available on the website. Please, everybody who still has questions, reach out to me. I will get back with you, I promise. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Great night.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.